Hey everyone, welcome to the Seeds of Success podcast, hosted by Dottie San Martin and myself, Orly Rivera. This show is your weekly dose of knowledge, insights, and actionable tips to transform centers into striking successes. Whether you are a seasoned industry professional or just stepping onto the lanes, we've got you covered. So Dottie, I got in trouble the other day. I sent my wife a text and I'm going to blame her. She doesn't listen to the show all the time, so I can say this. She read it a certain way, but it wasn't the way I intended it to come through. Sometimes I think you read a text message or an email in the tone that you think they're writing it to. And I think there could be some miscommunication there. Same even in person when you're speaking to someone. There's been times, again, where I say something, and I'm sure you do this to your husband. You let them know, hey, why does your tone sound like that? And you're like, oh, I don't feel like I was saying it that way. Sometimes you just don't realize the way you're coming across. And that's in person, that's in email, that's in text messages. And I think that's something important. There might be a time where you've wrote me an email and I'm like, oh no, did I do something wrong? Dottie seems a little upset in this email when technically you're not upset, but it was just the way I took it. And I think it's an important thing that you have to make sure you're communicating the right way with staff or customers or just anyone you're speaking to.
Yes, I certainly agree, Orly. Tone really does matter, and it matters more than words, really. You can have two different sentences using different words, and they can actually come off with two totally different meanings. So, as you're writing those text messages, think very carefully about the words that you're using and how they might come across or how they might be perceived by the person that's getting them. I mean, if you're intending for it to be supportive, make sure that the words that you choose are truly supportive and not like sounding like you're annoyed.
Yeah.
So, and having the right tone, it generates trust and clarity, and it starts to build those relationships, and it creates a reputation. So you want to make sure that, especially in texts and emails, that the tone is right, because it's not going to be obvious, because the person is having to read into that what you mean. So be very careful. It's different when I'm talking to you, Orly, and you can tell by my facial expression. Maybe I should use my husband as an example of this, because if I'm annoyed, he knows it by my tone of voice and my facial expression, right? We don't have the luxury of seeing that in an email or a text message. So, it's good to make sure that you're looking over it again and kind of putting yourself in the recipient's shoes and making sure that you're not using a word, like K versus okay, that you feel like you don't have time to really reply. That would be, how it would be perceived to me. Man, they didn't even take the time to write okay. And then I would be offended. So there is a lot you read into an email or a text message. You can read into it a lot. And that's really important, especially when you're dealing with communication going out to your customers or your employees. You don't want to come across the wrong way, the way that you didn't intend it.
Yeah. And I was just thinking that, if somebody's wondering, well, what are they talking about? Why are they talking about this? Because, I think it's a very important thing when it comes to maybe email blasts you're sending out. You want people to be like, oh, wow, this sounds fun. You don't want them to be like, gosh, it doesn't even sound like they want us to come in the way they're wording this, or, just things like that. And I think just even if you're talking to a customer in person, there's certain words like you mentioned that come off. I know people that don't like the word sure. A lot of people say it, but if you say like, hey, Dottie, you want me to cook you up some breakfast? Sure. Well, is it yes or is it no? Because I don't have to make you, there's certain words like that, or that's fine. I know that's another big one that people, and it doesn't bug everyone, but certain words do bug certain people. So you just have to make sure you're being clear. You don't come off like you're annoying somebody. You don't want a customer to come up and say, hey, can you come help me over here? Sure, that's fine. I'll come help you in a second. That sounds kind of rude. Or you could say, oh, of course. Yeah, I'd love to help you. Just give me one moment. I'll be over there to help you. It makes a big difference.
Yes. And back to print, print, be it email or text message, people are actually reading it in their own voice. And if you're not real clear, if you're ambiguous, people often Um, and their brains often default to that being a negative tone. So, be clear, make sure that there's no negative intent, there's no frustration, um, passive aggressiveness. Make sure you're very aware of that, unless you intend
Yeah.
to come across as upset or frustrated. Then that's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yeah, and I think with staff, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily do this to a customer, an email blast or something, but with staff, you could be upfront, whether it's the beginning of your email. Hey guys, this might come off like I sound like I'm a little upset, but just a heads up, I am not upset. I'm just trying to clarify some stuff. Or if you are upset, hey everyone, I'm a little upset of what I came across the other day, and I want to let you know a little bit more about it. That way, at least if they're going to read it and they know they're in trouble, they know they're in trouble. They're not just assuming it. But yeah, I think it's a big. I really do think the words you choose make a big difference on what you're saying. Or like you said, being very short with stuff. I've emailed someone before to maybe invite someone somewhere, and they kind of write back like, yeah, we could probably go. And it's like, okay, it doesn't sound like they really want to go though. And then in your head, you're like, well, they don't really want to go. I wonder why not? Are they mad? What happened last time? The last time I talked to them. And then you're going down this rabbit hole of worrying or, what happened, what went wrong. So yeah, I think you just have to be very clear. I think it's important.
And Orly, it's really interesting because, all of these things are really simple. We just have to be mindful of the phrases that we use. Something as simple as send me that report. To me, that sounds pretty demanding.
Yeah.
But I could make it sound a little bit softer, a little bit more collaborative by saying, can you send that report when you get a chance? To me, that's more my, as we said on a previous podcast, that's more my vibe. That's more the way I tend to talk. And using things like tone markers, like just a quick note or no rush on this, kind of setting the precedence, kind of setting the tone. So little phrases, little markers that kind of soften it up a little bit. And always, always, always read before you send, be it whatever. If it sounds harsh when you read it out loud, it probably is going to sound harsh when they read it, right?
Yeah. Or even little thing. I mean, this is kind of funny to think, but exclamation points, like if you're putting that on something and you're not yelling, or even all caps. I've seen someone before that accidentally had caps, and they're like, why are you yelling at me? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was on all caps.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, just remember when you are writing a message, there is no facial expression, there's no tone of your voice. And as we said earlier, a lot of times if it's a really short reply, then it seems dismissive or not interested or even angry. So just be aware. And then we go into face-to-face communication, right? That also, like we just said, my husband knows that when I have a certain tone, and I know for him too, when he's a little bit agitated, I can tell by his tone of voice. And a lot of times the person doesn't even realize it, that they're coming across with that type of a tone. So it's your inflection in your voice, and sometimes it's your body language. If you're talking to somebody and you've got your hands crossed over your chest and you're reared back, I don't know about you, but I'm gonna steer clear of that person because they seem like they're angry or agitated.
Yeah, like you said, sometimes you don't realize it, and someone's not going to tell you. But I will say, if you're married, they're going to let you know. Trust me.
Absolutely. And there's really some common mistakes when it comes to tone. As we said, you can come across as rude if you're being too direct or overusing sarcasms. That also can come across as, especially in writing, that can come across as arrogant or rude. Per our last email is another one that's passive aggressive. And not matching the tone to the situation sometimes. Maybe it's too serious. Maybe it's too casual. Maybe it's too formal because of the setting that you are in. So there's a lot of things that are just common, and a lot of it is just not being aware of how it's coming across. So always take that few extra minutes and think, how is this going to be perceived? How is someone going to take this email, this text message, this conversation, this phone call, even? Phone calls you can't really see, right?
Yeah.
But you can tell by their tone of voice.
Yeah.
So,
or smiling when we're doing the podcast. If we're smiling, you could tell that we're happy. You know, if we're in a bum mood, you're going to be able to hear it in our voice. And I think another thing that's important is you have to remember each person is different. So if you're working with somebody that's, you know, you might hear somebody say sometimes like, oh, they're a little sensitive, or, you know, or you have to take into consideration that when you're speaking to that person, or they get offended easy, or they, you know, or if you're just the type of person, I've met people before where I'm like, is that guy mad? And they're like, that's just how he is. He kind of messes with people. But if you're doing that to a customer and they don't know you, that could come off as, oh, that guy's rude. And then somebody's going to end up telling you, oh, no, he's always like that. It's just his way of joking with you. Well, I didn't know that. That could cause somebody to not come back or something. So I think you just have to really take in consideration who you're talking to, whether it's even an age group. Maybe, you know, you talk to kids different than you talk to somebody else that's maybe, you know, middle age or a senior that might, you know, think, oh no, is he upset or did I do something wrong? So I think you just have to take that all into consideration.
Yes, it's very important to adjust your tone by your audience. So whether it be a boss, a coworker versus a customer, a friend versus a professional contact, there's a different tone that you would want to use for your friend versus your professional contact. Yeah. Is it a new relationship versus an established one? Also, that level of trust comes into play there. So really, tone should be shifted based on the context of what you're trying to convey, the relationship that you have with the person that will be receiving that communication, and urgency, right?
Yeah.
Those are all things that are very important. So, well, I think this has definitely been a very helpful podcast. And I know this is audio only for most people, but hopefully you guys can tell by our tone that we enjoy what we do. And we are very thankful to be bringing you these little tips and tricks to help you be more successful in your everyday lives, be it your relationship, your personal relationships, or your relationship with your employees and your customers. So tone is really something that we really need to pay attention to. And a lot of times it's so overlooked.
Yeah, and your facial expression. If you don't know if you're giving off a bad vibe, I have a tip for you. Go in your bathroom, stand in front of the mirror and look at yourself at the face you usually give when you're standing around at your center. If you look kind of grumpy, make sure to put a smile on your face because people are seeing that same look from you.
You are so right. You are so right. Well, Orly, I would like to leave our listeners with just a couple of points from today. Tone is the difference between being understood and misunderstood in building trust versus damaging it. You don't need better words necessarily. You simply need clearer intent. Be aware of your tone. Thank you so much for being a part of today's episode of Seeds of Success. With decades of industry experience, we're honored to share ideas, strategies, and trends designed to help entertainment centers like yours thrive and grow. Together, we're planting the seeds for a stronger, more successful future. Share this podcast with your team and industry friends because the more seeds we sow, the greater the harvest. Until next time, listeners, let's continue to build success, one happy guest and one incredible experience at a time.